The anime started with the Demon King, who summons his glorious 4 elite generals of his army. The first to be summoned is Ulmandra, the Inferno Assailant. The second is Gnome the Bastion. The third is Sylphid, the Archmage of Storms. And the fourth is someone that the Demon King declares will become part of his army's strength and conviction. It is his newly chosen elite general that will help him conquer the world. He is a soul summoned from another world that will have powerful control overseas. The Demon King finishes summoning his elite general and announces the arrival of Denosuke, the overseas manager. A quick flashback shows that Denosuke considered himself to just be an insignificant salaryman. He was filled with hope when he began his first job, but all that quickly went into the dumpster. Denosuke started seeing that his colleagues were all getting promoted while all his work went unacknowledged. One day this got even worse when he was given orders to transfer overseas. All his co-workers pitied him because he was sent to what is considered a graveyard for losers. Denosuke tried to remain positive, but he quickly found that the power plant he was sent to was a mess, and the higher-ups didn't care. There was a shortage of equipment and manpower, but his boss told him that they couldn't waste more money. Denosuke lost several of his workers, but he always believed that he could make things work, so he continued to work hard. The challenges were chipping away at his life, but eventually things improved and the workers came back. All his hard work was finally paying off, as the power plant's success was beginning to skyrocket, but Denosuke was horrified to hear that he was being transferred to another country again. He questioned what he was doing all this for, but this was when his life was ended by Scooter-kun. Back to the present, Denosuke freaks out after realizing that he's now in another world. He's shocked to learn that someone knows his name, and the Demon King reveals that Denosuke is one of the elite generals of his army now, and he is the great overseas manager. The Demon King has Denosuke's entire work history, and he was very impressed by it. He saw how Denosuke managed to rebuild the failing power plant, and decided that he would be worthy of the Demon King's army. Of course, Denosuke is confused and terrified because joining the Demon King's army is not a career path he ever considered. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder, this is more like falling off of it completely. The Demon King senses his hesitance, so he reveals all the great benefits that come with being one of his elite 4 generals. Denosuke will receive the compensation and authority equivalent to the department managers of his old world. He will get to choose his subordinates, and he will even get his own office. The benefits are of course amazing, and Denosuke really has no reason to complain. The Demon King even offers to send him back to his old world if he declines. Denosuke is in awe of the Demon King now because he even respects worker rights. Denosuke becomes depressed when he thinks about how poorly he was treated at his old job, and says that he wasn't valued by his boss at all. He could never meet their expectations, and those who couldn't contribute to the organization were considered trash. Because of this, Denosuke has come to think of himself as trash, so he tells the Demon King that he's not worthy of the Demon King's army. Denosuke continues to put himself down, but the Demon King won't have any of it. He calls Denosuke's old bosses fools, and says that fools only value what they see. They pay no attention to the work done behind the scenes. The Demon King, on the other hand, has seen Denosuke's work, and he thinks that he can bring out the salaryman's full potential. He says it's not up to Denosuke to determine whether or not he is worthless, nor is it up to his old bosses. The Demon King says that it is he who will make that decision because he's the one that needs Denosuke. He then explains that the salaryman has 2 options: have his life ruined by working for fools, or serve the Demon King and aim for sky. Denosuke isn't sure about what to say, but he's interrupted by Ulmandra. She has an objection as she can't see how a weak human will be able to serve as one of the 4 elite generals. The others object as well, and Denosuke agrees with them. The Demon King shows his great leadership as he takes their options into consideration, and Denosuke is shocked when the Demon King decides to test him. Denosuke desperately tries to explain that he has no powers, but the others are fired up by the idea. Ulmandra has heard that humans from other worlds have special powers, and she wants to see it. She tests Denosuke with her most deadly blow, and he realizes that his death is inevitable. Luckily for him, the Demon King stops the crazy fire girl. She angrily wants to know why she was stopped, so the Demon King reveals that Denosuke just fainted from shock. It's pretty clear that he's just an ordinary human, and the Demon King explains that Denosuke doesn't have any powers. Of course, this makes the others object even more, since an incompetent human will never be accepted by an army full of powerful monsters. There is a power struggle between demons and demi-humans of the army, and Denosuke would get eaten alive. Gnome blames the demons for the power struggle, but Almandra blames the demi-humans. There is a clear struggle among the ranks, but that is exactly why the Demon King wants Denosuke to join them. He doesn't want Denosuke for his power, he wants him for his resourcefulness. Just then, Denosuke regains consciousness while still thinking about how Almandra's kick will destroy him into smithereens. The Demon King says that Denosuke doesn't have to worry. He doesn't want Denosuke for any physical abilities, and he will give the Salaryman a fitting exam. This is still pretty terrifying as Denosuke realizes that this is an otherworldly entrance exam. The Demon King goes into details and explains that his army is trying to make pacts with several tribes surrounding their land. Unfortunately, negotiations with one tribe in particular isn't going so well. That is why Denosuke's exam will be to successfully make a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denosuke's great negotiation skills, he must gain the Minotaur's trust and welcome them into the demon army. Denosuke is shocked by this sudden change in his life, and the Demon King tells him to ask Almandra if he has any questions. Unfortunately, Almandra doesn't like him very much, and she assured that Denosuke won't pass the exam. Of course, our boy is lacking in the confidence department, and simply considers himself to be a useless salaryman who can't use magic, and has no special ability. However, he has never worked for someone that actually needed him, so Denosuke really wants to live up to the Demon King's expectations. Just then, they arrive at the room where the Minotaur chief is staying. Denosuke is terrified by what the huge door means, and Almandra warns that Minotaurs are ferocious. She tells our boy that he needs to be cautious, or he will be trampled to death and turned into a human carpet. Denosuke tells himself to do his best, but that all falls apart when he sees how terrifying the Minotaur is. It truly is the embodiment of violence, and Denosuke imagines himself getting crushed. Almandra decides to help out the poor salaryman and shows him how negotiations are done. She asks for the great and powerful Certerius to hear what she has to say, and Denosuke's relieved that she can act as a mediator. However, his hopeful optimism goes straight out the window when Almandra just starts screaming at Terius. It's pretty clear that she's a terrible negotiator, and Terius just goes back in his room. Almandra reveals that negotiations with the Minotaurs were going well at first, but for some reason Terius started refusing everything. Almandra kept trying to complete negotiations day after day, but Terius just kept saying nay over and over again. On top of that, he tried bringing in a bunch of trash to throw around his room. Terius makes a bunch of noise as he thrashes about in his room, and Almandra simply leaves the rest to Denosuke. Our boy is terrified as the giant beast continues to thrash about, and he decides to go for a walk. He seriously doubts that he will even be able to talk to Terius, and he can even hear Almandra putting him down after failing. Just then, Denosuke strangely finds himself in a bar. He asks for the usual and thinks about how it's impossible to negotiate with someone who doesn't want to. At that moment, Denosuke realizes that he encountered a similar situation before. A client kept telling him no, and Denosuke was ready to give up on the negotiation. However, once they looked eye to eye, they finally understood each other. Denosuke now has a newfound confidence and assures that he can settle things. We then see that Almandra is reporting back to the Demon King. She doubts that an otherworlder will be able to complete negotiations, but the Demon King gives Denosuke some more time. Almandra goes to check on him, but she is shocked to find Denosuke digging through the trash. Denosuke explains that he wants to have a proper conversation with the Minotaur, but Almandra thinks it's impossible. The beast has a major attitude and he has no interest in making a deal. She is shocked, however, when Denosuke says that she's just giving up too early, and negotiations aren't going well because there must be a misunderstanding somewhere. The only way to reconcile things is to make eye contact with the other person while building a relationship of trust. Our boy confidently tells Almandra to watch him as he completes the negotiation, and she is stunned to see his transformation. The next day, Almandra barges into the room and is shocked to see that it's a complete mess. She fears that they had a battle, but Denosuke appears, and she blames him for making a mess. She wonders where Terius is, and Denosuke reveals that he's currently making the pact with the Demon King. Almandra is completely confused, so Denosuke clarifies that the Minotaurs and the demon army will finally be allies. Almandra refuses to believe that Denosuke was able to complete the negotiations in just one night, especially because Terius has been so difficult this entire time. Denosuke explains that you must know yourself so you can know your enemy, but she has no clue what he's talking about. He clarifies even further by pointing out how Almandra thought that Terius was refusing negotiations. She thought he was because he just kept saying nay to everything. Denosuke explains that the Minotaur actually thought the talks were going well. What helped Denosuke figure out the problem was his experience from someone telling him no over and over again. No matter what Denosuke tried, he couldn't convince this corporate boss to agree to the negotiations. The more he discussed details, the more emotional the guy became. It wasn't until Denosuke was ready to give up, but the guy decided to shake his hand. Turns out that the guy just liked to have lively conversations and wanted to hear as much detail as he could. In some countries and cultures, being emotional and passionate is good. That is where the misunderstanding came from. When Denosuke looked Terius in the eyes and really talked it out, he found out everything. Terius was just being passionate, but Almandra took it as him wanting to fight. That is why he got even more upset when she threatened to end the negotiations because of his behavior. Also, it's common courtesy in the Minotaur tribe to bring hay into the room when staying over. The kind Minotaurs do this to make sure they don't break the house's bed since they have such big bodies. His hay was mistaken for garbage, so Terius had to sleep on the floor and he was sleep-deprived. He was really frustrated, so he couldn't convey his feelings in a way that Almandra understands. Almandra realizes that she failed to make an effort to understand Terius, but Terius takes part of the blame as well. The two apologize to each other, and Terius thanks Denosuke for everything. As they say goodbye, the Demon King explains that the successful negotiation was thanks to Denosuke's talent, his ability to pick up on things that people normally wouldn't. The Demon King says that Denosuke passed the test, and welcomes him as a new member of the 4 elite generals. Almandra no longer doubts the Salaryman, and the Demon King tells him to hold out his arm. The Demon King gives him a bracelet and says that it will serve as proof that he is one of the great generals. The Demon King has full trust in him, and tells Denosuke to do what he thinks is best, and to do what he believes is right. After Denosuke thanks the Demon King, Almandra raises her arm to him. She's furious when he doesn't know what she's doing, so she tells him to raise his arm back. Denosuke does, and the two formally say their titles to each other. Almandra explains that this is how her clan welcomes new friends, but she goes back to her old self. As she tells him that she hasn't fully acknowledged him yet. The two run off together and the Demon King thinks about how a group that complements each other will also grow stronger together. Unfortunately, his army is still immature and incomplete. However, Denosuke will be their light and his brightness will lead the army so they can truly shine. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.